Greetings, y'all. Welcome back to the garden. It's the last week of April here in north central Florida, and the sun is shining and the birds are chirping, but it's hot. We kind of sprang right through spring, right into summertime, it feels like. We're already in the 90s. And so some of the transplants I put in the ground a couple of weeks ago are loving it, others not so much. So let's do a little quick tour of the yard. We'll see which ones are doing well and which ones might need a little bit of help. And I'll show you a little pro tip on how to use some synthetic fertilizer to kind of help those plants that might be struggling get caught up to some of their neighbors. Ordinarily, I'm not a huge big fan of synthetics, but there is a time and a place for them. And if you use them sparingly and use them appropriately, you won't do any damage to the microbial life in your soil. And your plants will actually really thrive and catch up to some of their neighbors that may be a little bit ahead of them. So let's do a little quick tour of the yard, then we'll tend to our babies that need it, and we'll see the best way to go about using fertilizers in general, specifically synthetics. All right, let's go. Alrighty, y'all. Here's a big old giant gardenia plant, which is just growing and growing and growing. You can see it's already above the roof, and it will eventually put out some beautiful, sweet-smelling white flowers. Here's a Confederate jasmine that you can see is in full bloom. I wish y'all could smell it. It has this amazing kind of magnolia honeysuckle aroma to it, and at night it's even more powerful. It's beautiful to walk through here at night. The banana patch is doing great. You can see within the last week or so, it's probably put out, triple the leaves it has in the past month. We've got our hydrangea here, which is wilting in the afternoon sun, but coming along nicely. We've got our elephant ear, camellias doing well. And as we come through our gate, we can see the wisteria, which had been in full bloom about a month ago, is now completely leafed out and is doing its good job of offering us some nice shade. So that's good. Come through the little gate here. Little ferns are catching up. You can see my thornless blackberry is coming back to life. It didn't like the snow we got this winter, but it's finally coming back. Here's a little recently transplanted mulberry that was lagging a bit, but has now put out some brand new leaves, so he's coming to life. Here's a little ice cream banana tree I just ordered from Amazon recently and transplanted. I've got a few more throughout the yard I'll show you as well. Here's my trash can taters, which have been doing amazing. I've hilled them twice and now they're just spilling out of the trash can itself. So I'm hoping that means there's lots of taters hiding down in there. It'll be another couple weeks or so before we harvest them. And a few of them are flowering, but that doesn't really mean anything. Just let them go, let them grow, and when the time comes, we'll just dump out the whole trash can and see what we harvest. Here's another one of those ice cream bananas that I transplanted recently. It seems to be doing fine. Here's one of several bean patches I have throughout the yard, and I've got yellow, green, and purple bush beans going through here, along with native wild ginger. I'm kind of hoping the beans will grow up the ginger. Here's a Turk's cap hibiscus, which has really sprung to life in the last couple weeks. Here's a planter full of lilies and spider plant. Tons of mulberry transplants. Here's some green onions from the grocery store I just put in the dirt. These are some foxgloves that I recently transplanted, and you can see they're looking kind of anemic and kind of yellow. So I'm going to hit them with a little bit of that synthetic fertilizer I mentioned earlier, and they'll spring right back to life. Here's various types of basils. As we come over this way, we can see my messy potting bench, my monstera, which is now well over 6 foot tall. We've got strawberries, which are starting to make fruit, starting to fill in their pot, which is nice. We've got angel trumpet tree, which again, this is the middle of the afternoon, so it's a bit wilted, but it's actually tripled in size in just the last week or so. And I even went and rescued a guava plant from my homestead that we visited last week and transplanted it here in town, so it's doing great now. As we come down the little trail here, little steps, we can see the papaya plant. This joker has probably doubled in size in just the last week, and you can see it's putting out a nice fresh new leaf. And so I'm hoping that it has a long enough growing season to actually put out some good fruit. My neighbors did last season, so I'm hoping mine will this year. As we come down our little pathway here, here's some of our Mexican sunflower. This is already up to my hip. It's doing great. Elephant ears. Here's volunteer sunflowers from the bird seed, really squirrel seed, that I put out every morning. But those sunflower seeds will take root and they will actually start to bloom. I'll show you some examples throughout the yard here in a minute. And you see they'll actually make multiple heads on them as well. So they're really actually pretty. So anytime you have your bird seed in your yard, just let it go. You'll get yourself some free sunflowers out of the deal. And here's a little passion flower vine that I transplanted last week. It's coming along nicely. As we make our way over here, we've got a couple more patches of beans. We'll come down here to the muscadine. I was worried about them after our snowstorm, but they finally started to come back to life. So I went through, trimmed off this extra main stem, so now I'm left with a single primary stem that goes up with one branch that goes left, one branch that goes right. So now all of those roots can focus all of their energy just into two main stems. And as you can see, it's really started to leaf out nicely. And it has this whole brand new chain link fence to grow on, so hopefully that'll work out nicely as well. Here are some transplanted wisterias that took nicely. I was a little bit worried about them. Again, another baby ice cream banana tree that's doing great. Elephant ears are coming to life. Another volunteer sunflower. Pretty magnolia tree coming in. Here's a little great patch of Cherokee purple tomatoes that are just doing great. They were probably as big as my finger when I put them in the ground 2 weeks ago, and now they're twice as big as my hand, doing just fine. Look at these sunflowers. These guys are already starting to bloom, and ideally these will form seeds in the head here, and then they will drop and we'll get some. Well, you can see where the squirrels have figured out how to bite the top off the sunflower plant, but that actually just encourages it to make even more buds and more flowers. We find our way through here. We can see Meyer lemon tree, big sunflower coming in. That'll be fun. Monsteras, gardenia, watermelon, peppers, and a blueberry bush, which I forget the exact name of, but it's putting on some nice size fruit. Now as we make our way to the front here, we have banana patch, which is doing great. We have a baby monstera starting to come in. We have lemongrass coming in. And here's my melon patch this year. I put all the different kind of melons I'm doing here. And as you can see, we've got some individuals that are not doing so great, others that are looking awesome, even though they're all the exact same variety, grown in the exact same conditions. So that's where that synthetic fertilizer can come along and kind of help the slow guys catch up to the fast guys. But as you can see, they're all coming along nicely for the most part, and are even as big as my hand. We just need some rain. It's just been so dry here that you can only do so much with the sprinklers and everything. All right, here's some more lemongrass and peppers. There's all kind of peppers put through this patch. Here's one little tomato patch doing well. We can see the pineapples are zooming back to life. The Fakahatchee grass is going to seed naturally, which is great. This is a little wildflower patch I put down, and you can see little new wildflowers are starting to come up. Here's a Chinese lantern plant that's looking cute. This mulberry tree is going ballistic. Ooh, look, y'all. Here's one right here. Nice. Oh, I dropped it, of course. Here we go, y'all. Yummy. Yummy, delicious. Mulberry really is one of the all-time great inventions. You got to get you some mulberries. I made a video before on how to nice and tart. I made a video before on how to propagate mulberry, and you can find that on the channel, and it's well worth the effort. One mulberry will turn into 100 in no time, and you'll love it. This is a tea olive tree, which also makes these beautiful little white flowers that have pretty much peaked, but they have a beautiful sweet smell to them, especially at night here. These are a native, what's called a salt and pepper plant, really good for butterflies. And this is a native indigo plant, also makes pretty white flowers for butterflies. Obligatory banana tree, but again, putting out lots of new leaves, it's doing well. Hydrangea, wisteria, and another tomato patch. And you can see they're all doing pretty well, all about a foot high or so. And the good old elephant ear. And then we're back to where we started. Alrighty, y'all, here's a little quick lesson on fertilizers and how they work and what to know and what to be mindful of while you're using them. Basically, the plant will ultimately never know the difference between an organic and a synthetic fertilizer. They're all going to use the same ions of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium at the end of the day. That's the NPK you see on the labels, right? The trick is just how do you deliver it to them. By using a synthetic fertilizer, it instantly becomes available into a water-soluble solution, versus using an organic method, which is often slow release and uses microbes or some other intermediary to break down large macromolecules eventually down into their ionic form. But ultimately they end up in the same place. It's just that one is a little quicker than the other. One's a bit more concentrated than the other. But the chemicals at the end of the day are the same. So if you have some plants that are struggling or waiting to come online in your organic system because they are slow release and tend to take weeks before they really start making their nutrients available, it's okay to use small amounts of dilute synthetic fertilizer. It's not going to kill the plant, it's not going to kill the microbes. You just have to be mindful of it. And there's just a few basic rules you want to kind of keep in mind. Plants tend to like a 3:1:2 ratio of N to P to K. If you can find something like that or some multiple of that, then that's great. You can then concentrate it or dilute it accordingly. You'll often see what are called well-balanced fertilizers, meaning they're the same number across the board, 5-5-5, 10-10-10, something like that. And there's nothing particularly wrong with that. It's just that having those imbalances, having excess of certain nutrients, means they either go to waste or could potentially cause some minor issues down the line. It's not a deal breaker or anything, but if you can find them in that natural 3:1:2 ratio, your plants will have to do a little bit less work and you don't have to worry about burning or overfeeding them quite so much. And you'll often find these in synthetic forms using that ratio, but it will just be a much higher multiple of that. And I'll show you an example of that later. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the plant won't know the difference if it's getting its nitrogen from a synthetic source or from a source that was broken down from a larger macromolecule. It's just that one is faster, one is slower. I don't use synthetics often, but there is a time and a place for them. When you have younger plants or some that are kind of struggling and need a little kick in the pants, you might say it's okay to use a little kiss of that synthetic fertilizer. We just want to use ratios that are below 10-10-10 across the board and keep that relative proportion of 3:1:2 if at all possible. If you can't do that, if all you can get is 10-10-10 or 5-5-5 or something like that, that's fine. But if you can, it's nice to kind of build that ratio into the fertilizer from the start. Your plants will thank you for it. So we'll go do a little example of it here in real life. I'll show you the sort of specific ingredients I'm using, and then you can take that concept and apply it to your own plants. But just realize that synthetic does not mean evil, right? In the same way, organic does not mean automatically good. And once you understand the fundamental chemistry, you realize it's ultimately the same thing. It's just two paths to the same top. All right, we'll go do an example of it. I'll show you how I do it, and then you can try it for yourself one day. Awesome, let's go. Alrighty, y'all, here's an example of that fertilizer we're going to be using today, and it just sort of has all of the traits that we're looking for. It's all-purpose, it's water-soluble, and it can be used for fruits and vegetables, right? And most importantly, it has this 3:1:2 ratio that we're looking for. If we divide everything by the smallest number, 8 in this case, we'll see that it comes out to exactly 3:1:2, which is perfect. This is a little more concentrated, a little bit more powerful than we would like. We don't want anything to go much above 10, so we're actually going to dilute this by 3 times. So rather than adding 1 scoop to 1 gallon of water, we'll add 1 scoop to 3 gallons of water, and that will retain our 3:1:2 ratio while putting everything well below 10-10-10 across the board. The things we're looking for most is that it's instantly available to our plants. It can be taken up by the roots and the leaves via foliar feeding, and it has that 3:1:2 ratio. Right, y'all, here we are at a little tomato patch here in the front yard, and as you can see, we've got all types of different varieties growing under more or less identical conditions here. And as you can see, we have variation among the individuals, right? Some are looking kind of small, others are doing quite well. Some are still in their vegetative growth, while others are actually already starting to put out flowers, right? But because these guys are so small and because it's been so hot and so dry, and tomatoes don't necessarily like that, especially when they're young, I want to encourage a little bit more vegetative growth right now, a little bit more roots, a little bit more leaves, so that they can eventually get trained up onto their, tomato cage, right? And there's several ways we can do that. One way is to go through and pick out these early flowers. This plant is awful young to try to be making fruit, so we want it to put its energy into roots and leaves rather than fruit at this point. Plus, if this were to put on fruit now and it were to fall towards the ground, then pests and bugs could get to it a lot more easily. And in that same spirit, I want to go through here and pinch off a lot of these little lower leaves and things, right? That way it makes it just a little bit harder for bugs to climb up and get onto them. It only seems like an inch or two to us, but that's a mile to a bug, right? So now they have a nice, clean, airy stem. We've taken off the premature flowers. It's going to encourage a little bit more vegetative and root growth. And it will now even out the pace of all of these tomatoes a little bit, right? So we don't have some that are way into flower while others are lagging way behind. Here's a great example of how much variation you can have within just 2 feet, all under identical conditions. We've got this little variety, which is doing quite well and is bigger than my hand and is, gosh, probably quadrupled in size since when I put it in the ground. It's nice and green and leafy and bushy. But if we walk over just 2 feet over here, we can see this little guy, which is struggling, right? And that's normal, y'all. Don't beat yourself up if some are doing well and some are doing bad. That's just the nature of nature, right? There's always going to be stronger and weaker individuals. So, you never know what's happening in the soil, even just a few feet apart. So again, by taking off these premature flowers and kind of evening out the pace of these plants by using this fertilizer to kind of help catch everybody up to the same stage of growth, I think that'll make the harvest a lot easier too. But it is amazing how within the same patch of dirt from here to there, you can get so much variation and vigor and health. But again, that's perfectly normal and that's perfectly natural. Don't beat yourself up for it. That's why we plant plenty of extra. Alrighty, y'all. Thanks for joining me again this week in the garden. I hope the tour was fun. And don't be afraid to give synthetic fertilizers a try either. There's a time and a place for them in the garden, especially when you have younger plants that haven't really got their adult roots down yet. Giving them a little bit of quickly, readily available nutrients can really help get them up and running when they're young. Just follow those few basic rules we went over, right? Try to keep everything at that 3:1:2 ratio, and trying not to let any one of those get much above 10 in terms of their concentration. And when in doubt, always do a lesser concentration than you think. You can always add a little bit more nutrients, but it's harder to get them out if you've added too much. But there's nothing to be afraid of. Synthetics, at the end of the day, is the same chemistry as organic gardening. It's just that organics use microbes to break down macromolecules into those final nutrients, whereas the synthetics just make it readily available in an ionizable liquid form. It's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, and as long as you know what you're doing, you'll be just fine. So thank you for joining me again this week, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers and chews.